We can bring inflation down while lifting living standards up. And we can do so by benefiting 90% of people. You know who's going to take a haircut? Those rich people that don't want to share, that are never going to vote Labor, and that genuinely believe that working people are just cogs in a machine and their most important right is to make unlimited wealth. I'm not worried about annoying them, Stephen, personally. I think it's about time someone said no to them.
Hi, Social Democrats. It's Stephen here. We want to get to know you better. We want to know who's listening to Socially Democratic and what you want the show to be about. So we've launched the Socially Democratic Listener Survey. It's just 15 quick questions and will only take about 3 minutes to complete, and it's completely confidential. And as a thank you for doing so, anyone who completes the survey will go into the draw to win a trip to Adelaide for the 2026 ALP National Conference, which is happening in July this year, including return domestic flights and accommodation. And if the winner happens to be from Adelaide, then you're going to get a trip on the Popeye for free. No, just joking. If you are from Adelaide, then we're going to fly you to Melbourne for one of our live shows leading up to the Victorian state election. Now, if you're from overseas, obviously we can't include international flights and accommodation, but we still want to get your feedback and complete the survey as well, because your input is super, super important to us as a member of our overseas listening audience. The winner will be drawn on St. Patrick's Day, the 17th of March. So lucky for some. To take part in this listener survey, just click the link in this episode's show notes and let us know everything that is important to you in terms of your podcast, Socially Democratic. Thanks. The presenting sponsor for Socially Democratic is Dunn Street. Dunn Street is a campaign agency that specialises in community organising. We only work with people and organisations who want to build power to make the world a better place. And if you want to create change in your world in 2026, then hit us up at dunnstreet.com.au. We'd like to welcome two of our newest members of the Socially Democratic Patreon community, Steve Grimmett and Basil Varghese. Steve and Basil, thank you so much for supporting the show. And as Patreon subscribers, you can now take part in both our mailbag and our Feeny Files with Jesse McCrone episodes in our Patreon group threads on the Patreon page. And don't forget to check your DMs on Patreon. We need your shipping details so we can send out your Socially Democratic welcome packs. All right, let's get on with today's episode. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by Maurice Blackburn Lawyers. For over a century, Maurice Blackburn has stood up for fairness, championing the rights of everyday Australians and shaping landmark legal reforms. Today, they're harnessing new technologies to make justice more accessible, more efficient, and more responsive to the needs of modern Australia. All right, let's get on with today's episode. We are taping this one on a Tuesday afternoon on the lands of the Wurundjeri people. It's a hot afternoon in Melbourne. I am waiting for that cool change to come through. I don't know. I'm sharing that with you because you're probably listening on the weekend and now it's completely different weather and you're probably in a different part of the country and it doesn't mean anything to you. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We are talking to someone who, if you've been a long time listener to the pod, will know of her work. She's now in a different job though, similar kind of field. She's the executive director for the Chifley Research Centre, which is the Labor Party's official think tank. Emma Dawson, welcome back to Socially Democratic.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
Now, the last time you spoke, obviously you were here in your capacity as working at Per Capita.
Yeah.
I think it was like when we were doing our post-budget review episodes that we've sort of done a couple.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Over the years. And you're now at the Chifley Research Centre. Is this a case of just when I'm out, just when I think I'm out, they pull me back in? Or is it more a case of just wanting to sort of, do a bit of different work, but in a similar kind of space? What drew you to working for Chifley?
The job would have been vacant for a while and I was talking to them about various other things and I said, should I put my hat in the ring? They said, yes, please. So I wasn't looking to leave Per Capita particularly for just anything. I'd been at Per Capita 9 years though, and I kind of felt like it was time to let someone else have a go there. I'd done as much as I could with it. And I, unlike a lot, this was before the election in 2025, so about a year ago, when they first started talking to me. And unlike a lot of people, I was quite confident of a Labor majority at the election. I didn't think we'd get 90 full seats, Stephen, but I was reasonably confident by that point after seeing Albo's performance in the summer that we, and having been exposed to what's going on overseas as well, that Labor would win a majority. And I thought, well, that's going to be an opportunity for genuine reform, a second-term majority Labor government. We haven't had that for a long time. We only got a one-term Labor majority under Rudd and Gillard, and that I wanted to come inside the tent. I'm a Labor member. I'm a Labor voter. I come from a strong Labor Party background in the UK, or certainly, not a lot of people very involved in the party, but in the movement, certainly in the working class north of England, and wanted to be. To use my abilities, whatever they are, to support a genuine social democratic reform program, work with what I think is a really talented federal parliamentary Labor Party, but most particularly work with the membership and with the party itself, with all the ordinary members that know and that believe that only a good, strong Labor government is going to deliver what this country needs to turn it around and to stop us getting to the point that they're at in the UK and the US with such sort of divisive populist politics. And it was a very deliberate decision on my part to go for it. I was pretty upfront about, this is not a job you put me in while I'm waiting for a seat in Parliament. That's not me. I'm a wonk. And the time I was interviewing for it, I was doing the Community Tax Summit in Melbourne about 12 months ago. In fact, 12 months ago today, I think. So they knew what my views were on various issues. And they were unanimous in offering me, well, the board was unanimous, I assume, in offering me the opportunity. So I grabbed it and I started just after the election.
That's brilliant. I think you're the fourth person in this role that's been on the show.
Right.
Your predecessors have graced the airwaves of Social Democratic, but for listeners to the podcast that are new to us and don't know the role that Chifley plays, maybe it's worthwhile just explaining that for us.
Yeah, so Chifley is the party's official think tank. Each of the major parties have one. Liberals have the Menzies Research Institute, the Nats have the Page Research Institute, and the Greens have the Greens Institute. Whether Pauline Hanson will be qualified to get one anytime soon is another question.
It'll be called the Nuremberg Institute.
Something ridiculous like that. The Bielke-Peterson Institute, perhaps. But Chifley is really it's trusted with the history of the party is one thing, so that we manage a lot of Labor history publications, events, and exploring that history right back 135 years now since the great ALP was formed, and 125 years this year since Federation, so since the Federal Parliamentary Labor Party, 125 years it has existed. I thought last week we were going to see the end of the coalition after a few years, possibly the end of the Liberals as we know it. So the history of the party and its purpose, its relationship to the Labor movement here and internationally. So we do a lot of work with other organisations around the world, think tanks in the UK, US, Canada, Germany, New Zealand, that are affiliated with their social democratic or Labor parties. And we also do quite a lot of events work, explaining Labor policy. We also have, like any other member, I'm an ordinary member of the party and I can have an input into those policy conversations as well. We don't do as much independent research as, say, a Per Capita or John Curtin Research Centre or a McKell, but we do. I am, asked for my thoughts on things. I put submissions into inquiries and into policy processes behind the scenes. I have a great board made up of Labor Party members, union officials, party officials, interested people, smart people who help us think about that as well. And we also try to play a kind of I'm certainly going to step this up, a kind of coordinating role with the centre-left think tanks, ideologically aligned organisations, and in reaching out to the membership. And that's something I'm going to put a lot of resources into over the next 2 to 3 years, is giving ordinary members and ordinary non-members voting, that might be inclined to vote for us, a pathway in to talk about what the party does, what the policies need to be, how we can really maximise this opportunity with a good, strong Labor majority to make a real material difference in people's lives. And I also want to reach beyond that kind of bubble of people that, are very, very, very engaged, and reach the people that think about politics but, don't live and breathe it every day, but help them understand why it's relevant to them to get more involved. So,
and I think maybe later on the show we'll talk a bit about the relationship that Chifley has with the policy development process, because obviously this year is a year in which we have a national conference.
That's right.
And it's the supreme decision-making body for our wonderful party that is, you're right, 135 years old. But I want to sort of turn first of all to the opportunities that you've spoken about with this new Albanese Labor government and this big fat majority that they earned at the last election in May last year. And I am conscious of giving an example of something that's sports related, because I know that lots of people don't actually give a rat's ass about sport, but I'm only saying this just so I can my own brain can work it out. But when I was thinking about this question, I was thinking about identity. And I was thinking about, and maybe it's a bit of a cliche, but sporting teams talk about, what's the sporting team's identity? Like the 2013 Red Sox, which is one of my teams, had that sort of nobody believes in us kind of backs to the wall kind of our identity that led them to win a World Series. Or maybe sometimes you can have a bad identity. I don't know if you're a St Kilda fan, but they've got a poor club culture, mired in unprofessional leadership and missed opportunities. That's an identity that sometimes you probably don't want to get.
Saints are my second team. They were my late husband's team. But, that's absolutely true about the Saints.
Yeah, so you're Saints adjacent. Yeah. But even in politics, governments have identities. Oppositions can have identity. Yeah. When I think about the former Andrews government, it was very much a getting shit done kind of identity. The Hawke, certainly the early Hawke years was about, reconciliation and reconstruction and rebuilding the Australian economy. So my question is, what do you think the identity is of this Albanese government?
It's interesting you said that about the Hawke identity, because, of course, that reconstruction, rebuilding the country has been the hallmark of every successful Labor government in Australia, really. At least if you go back to the Second World War, the national reconstruction after the war was a Chifley Curtin project. Menzies took it over after the election in 1949, but a lot of what he did was set out in that white paper blueprint under Curtin and Chifley. Whitlam, again, it was about dragging this country into the modern era, reforming systems that had been left to get very sclerotic under the Liberals for 23 years. Hawke, Keating, same thing. And while the Rudd-Gillard years were obviously noted for their internal squabbling, there was quite a bit of, legislative work done there too. I do think, so the first thing to say, I think it's easier in Australia for state governments to come up with an identity, right, because they're in the business of delivering things to people. So you can say, right, I'm building this road, or I'm building this hospital, or we're the education state. Federally, that's harder, not only because constitutionally you don't have your hands on a lot of those delivery levers, but because the identity of a Queensland government might be very different to the identity of a South Australian government. So you're working across those spaces. But I think if you do look, and I've made this point without giving away any spoilers, I have a correspondence piece in the next quarterly essay in reply to Sean Kelly. And I've made
really?
Yes, I do. I've made this point there that if you look at what Labor has done over the last 4 years and about what it's talking about now, that is a reformist agenda. It's not a big, showy, blow the world up, divisive agenda, but it's a reformist agenda. And I think in terms of where it's pitched, where that identity is, this is what Albanese means when he says we want to be the natural party of government. We represent the vast majority of interests in this country, right? The vast majority of people in this country are working or middle class. They're living off their labour. They are feeling quite a lot of pressure in terms of inflation and cost of housing and so on. The identity of this government is reaching those people, is talking to people that the Labor movement was invented to serve, being very concerned with the quotidian needs of ordinary working people. And I think if there's any phrase that describes what the party would want, or what the government would want its identity to be, it's that they're on your side. They're on the side of people rather than of big companies or, particular vested interests or social movements. They're on the side of people. No one held back, no one left behind is the kind of language. Ultimately, governments don't decide their identities. Voters do. And often it's done in retrospect and it's hard to see when it's happening. And I think Labor always suffers because people tend to vote Labor in federally when they've got absolutely fed up with the status quo and they want things shaken up. So they want a big statement of identity. They never want that from the Conservatives because they put them in when times are reasonably comfortable and let them, just manage things. And so that's often and always has been a real challenge for Labor. Sean makes this point, and he's right in his essay, that that's been since the very earliest days of a party that was founded by quite a radical workers' movement, but chose, as the Prime Minister said in Liverpool last year to the UK Labor Party conference, chose the path of democracy to make change rather than revolution or protest or disruption, but democracy. And so it's a solidly socially democratic, very appropriately government. And I think its identity will be one that delivers, as state Labor governments have had, but often the delivery of those things are harder to see in the moment because it's not about building things physically, it's about changing structures and institutions to support more people rather than just those at the extremes.
Do you think, though, that I'll push back on that a little bit in terms of the Andrews government, that folks knew what it stood for?
Over time, yeah.
Because I think it was coming back in certainly the groups was people would say things like, you may not like him, but at least he gets shit done.
No, absolutely.
And I think that
that he got shit done stuff, like he talked about that, wanting to get shit done, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was a phrase that first came through a focus group. You'd know that better than me. So, yeah, but he did it and then people went, that's the identity of this. So it was very deliberate.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is you don't set out to say, I'm Dan the builder, you just do it. And then people go, look what he's done. He's built stuff. And similarly, I think it's harder federally. It's harder because you've got that cacophony of different voices in the media. You've got, a much bigger, obviously, constituency to deal with, and parts of the country are, regional and rural areas are less socially progressive than urban areas. But, yeah, ultimately, I think if you look at what the government's doing, there is a very clear program there. It may not be set out as, in a declaration of, narrative, but it's there to me.
I do want two things I'm curious about. One is to that point, and I'm glad I was going to ask you, could you put it into a phrase? And you did. You said, we're on your side. I'm wondering if that's what, broadly speaking, those that are somewhat engaged in politics or interested in, the way that their government is run would say that. That's the first thing I'm curious about. And the second one is I'm actually interested in wondering if members of our federal Labor Parliamentary Caucus think that. And I happen to know that a number of them listen to this podcast. And feel free to text me and tell me what you think the identity of the government is. And I wonder if it's the same between all of them. And that's not. I'm not being a smart ass there. But I just genuinely am wondering if that's
people will have different responses to that question. I mean, that's what I observe, having looked at the program. I think interesting if you bring up caucus. So one of the last pieces of work I kicked off before I left Per Capita, and it was done by Sarah McKenzie, who was my policy director there, and then left and has now actually joined Chifley as a research director here.
Sarah McKenzie.
Yep.
Sarah
She's
Mackenzie, who is also the candidate for Richmond.
She is indeed. So get around Sarah Mackenzie's candidacy in the state government for Richmond, even though that means that I'll lose her working for me. But I'm happy to sacrifice that to the good people of Victoria. She did a piece of work called The Way In for us. We've done it for every parliament since the 45th, I think, where we look at the background of parliamentarians, those people elected, and compare them to the Australian community. So in terms of their age, gender, educational background, ethnicity, etc. This is the most diverse Labor caucus in history, and it's the most diverse representation we've seen from any parliamentary party in history. Not only is the caucus and cabinet gender equal in terms of there are, as many women, if not more, particularly in the Senate, but a lot of those newer caucus members that have come in at 2022 and 2025 are really genuinely representative of their communities. So there's been a bit of a shift in some of the pre-selection approaches around the country by Labor to mirror what a lot of the community independents have done. And they've put up people that aren't necessarily lifelong political operatives or apparatchiks, but they are from their community. So we've got a lot of first-term or second-term MPs from different cultural and religious and ethnic backgrounds, from local government, from community organisations, from small business, from people that genuinely know and come from their communities. And I think there's a lot of commentary amongst the progressive media that, the caucus is too scared and no one's standing up and they're not doing anything big. A lot of these people, let's bear in mind they're still finding their feet. They came in 2025. But they are there to bring, it's a two-way conversation, caucus, right? It's not about sitting there and being told what the Prime Minister or the Treasurer thinks we're going to do. It's about bringing the views of their constituents and their communities, and critically through the Labor movement of working people as well. So they're all going to have a different view about what their part in that Labor identity is. As with any big win, there's some people in caucus that never expected to be there, but very happily are. Hi, Sarah Whitty, we're delighted for you. And Ali France, well done, absolute giant slayers, both of you. But that sounded trivial, but there's an important thing to remember, that it's not just a very diverse caucus, but the process by which Labor caucus, so the cabinet, the caucus and the parliamentary party, the membership, the affiliates, and works through what we do as a party and the policies we take, and that it is incremental. It is inclusive and consultative, and that means sometimes we proceed more slowly than some more radical members of the community would like us to. But the direction is embraced, and people sign up to that and work collectively for change. So,
I mean, I was looking back in terms of previous Labor governments. We haven't had a majority this big since 1983.
Well, proportionally, that's right.
Yeah. And in terms of, and I'm going to ask you in a minute about what your wish list would be, but is this kind of a now or never moment for this particular government in terms of the life of where it is?
It's
in terms
a now.
Of big reform, big...
Second year, second term, big majority. It's definitely a now moment. I don't know that it's a never moment. I'm not a never. I never say never. But it's a now moment. It's certainly, if you look at everything the Prime Minister and senior members of his team have said for the last 4 years, it's about implementing bold policy, but in a way that is less contentious than it has been in the past. So trying to find, consensus isn't always possible, or sometimes even desirable, because you're not going to get consensus on social democratic reforms from people that are ideologically opposed to you, and you don't want it. But not so much consensus as people buying in, multiple parties feeling they have ownership of change. But then also doing that in a way that means that those things are less likely to be undone. So one of the big lessons Albanese, as manager in the opposition business in the House, major strategist, senior minister in the Rudd Gillard years, found was that he shepherded more legislation through that hung House of Parliament than any previous manager of government business, but too much of it was undone too quickly after we lost government. And so, yes, you're right. This is second term. This is when you do some big things, not that there haven't been some big things done already. It annoys me when people say they haven't, because they have. But when I hope and I believe that people will start to see this reformist agenda come together, building that trust with the community, finding also new ways of communicating political ideas, because, it's changed even since I was an advisor 15 years ago. You could pretty reliably know that what was on the front page of the paper would be what people are talking about. That's not true anymore. It could be any social media channel that's driving the day's debate. So bringing people with you in this climate is trickier than it used to be, but more important than ever. If you look at what's happening in the UK and Europe and the US, this idea of standing up and screaming about I'm right and we're going to impose this is a recipe for more of that division. So quietly building trust, bringing people in, helping people to see that, yes, actually, you might have been scared off for 30 years by, rhetoric that says Labor's captured by blah, 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 and the unions, but actually these are the policies that are in your material interest, and trying to push back at 40 years of rhetoric and misinformation that has persuaded working people to vote against their self-interest, which is why so many of them now are moving to One Nation in despair.
I'm interested in your take on the concept of populist policy. I had an interview this morning with an academic in Canada who wanted to talk to me about community organising, specifically though electoral organising, and the role of community organising can play in strengthening of a democracy. And we kind of went down a whole bunch of rabbit warrens, but one of them was about the rise of populist right-wing populism. And I sort of said, well, and I hadn't really, these thoughts, I must say, Emma, weren't completely well formed. I hadn't had a great sleep. It was 8 o'clock in the morning. But anyway, and I thought to myself, I guess something I've been sort of ruminating in my head a bit for a while anyway, is that there's like radical left-wing populism. There's radical right-wing popularism. And so we look at like One Nation and think, it's the popular right and that's a bad thing. Or maybe we look at the radical left populism and that's a bad thing. But ultimately, in a democracy, you kind of want to be popular because if you're not popular, then you don't get elected. And if you're not elected, then you can't actually bring about change to the status quo. So it's important to be a party that offers popular ideas. And I just wonder sometimes, is the word popular getting lost a little bit? Because we like academics and that like to sort of pigeonhole things and say, popularism, it's killing whatever, right? I don't know if there's a question there, but I just want to get your thoughts.
It absolutely is, and it goes to something I'm writing long form about at the moment, actually, which is, well, on the left, we love to bag neoliberalism, right? Neo meaning the new liberalism. Populism can be damaging when it means people with reactionary politics that aren't well thought through and would do actually harm to the thing they profess to care about. And right-wing populism often exploits that. So it exploits people's emotional reaction to disadvantage or unfairness and drives that into things that will benefit the populist leader without necessarily benefiting them. Trump, classic example, right? I'm gonna drain the swamp. First things he does is cut taxes for the rich and take healthcare away from people. What the word really missing here is democracy, because what liberalism is, liberalism really emerged after the French Revolution, as a way to say, well, we can't have these peasants running the show. All these people that are suddenly voting and have enfranchisement, and then as we go on through the next 200 years, bloody union movements, labour movements, working people making an impact. So a lot of liberalism, while it is couched, and there are good things about it in terms of the rights of the individual and, the rule of law and so on, but if you look at it, a lot of them were set up to counter mass movements of democracy. So to say, well, we'll have judicial review of a jury, for example, or we'll have a lot of our economic institutions, the World Bank, the IMF, so on, they're set up to be super judiciary, to sit over the top of democratic nation states. And so really, if you're saying, is it neoliberalism versus, the populist left or collective action versus the populist right. What we have to do is restore people's sense that they have a stake in their democracy and that their views are going to be listened to, because that's the purpose of democracy. When we go too far and dismiss anything that's popular as populist and therefore illegitimate, we are buying into the framing of our enemies, which is the ruling class know how the world should be run and you lot should stay out of it. And we'll set up some institutions so it doesn't look like we're just controlling the world. But if you see what's happened to the economy over the last 50 to 60 years, that's absolutely been an attempt to remove control of international markets and capital and wealth from the will of the majority of people that don't access them. So populism can be an expression of the collective public will and can be dismissed when it's right. Things like tax changes and how we're told, well, you don't possibly know what you're talking about with the tax system and housing's very complicated, And people go, no, actually, I'm voting for my kids to have a house. You work out how to do that, but that's what I'm voting for. And so it is dangerous to exploit that. And I think we saw at the last election with both the Greens and the Liberals just taking an absolute shellacking, where the Greens want to pretend they didn't, right? Oh, we maintained our vote in the House. You had a huge surge of votes amongst younger people, which means you've lost a lot of more mature and experienced voters. And when it came to lower house seats, pretty much wiped out. And Peter Dutton on the right. So the Greens went very left populist under the influence of Max Chandler-Mather. And where that's dangerous is when you're exploiting grievances but then not actually consulting people on the solutions or offering to engage with them on real solutions. You're saying, you hate this, therefore on the right, it's those horrible immigrants taking the houses, and on the left, all landlords are bastards, right? That's not a solution. Neither of those things are a solution. And so that's when it gets dangerous. But it is absolutely true that globally, for the last 40 to 50 years, democracy has been in decline because of the assault of very, very wealthy, privileged people who have used an extreme form of market capitalism and have twisted the concept of liberalism into something that's exploitative, and that the individual, the rights of the individual have been completely subsumed by the rights of the corporation, and people have had enough. So do we want to embrace populism? We want to embrace popular policies when they work for the majority of people, and that is absolutely quite radical compared to the last 40 to 50 years. But it's not the same thing as saying a pox on both your houses, let's turn to a strong man. And I think Albanese is, it's a Howard thing. The times genuinely suit him. 20 years ago, no one would have predicted Anthony Albanese would be the Prime Minister, let alone the leader of the Labor Party. But his values and his very dogged way of pursuing reform, and often complex reform, you've got to remember he's got a background as an infrastructure minister, I think is the right approach for the times, because things are just incredibly volatile. It's a tinderbox, it's not actually as bad here as it is in Europe and the UK and the US, and yet we can feel it's pretty bad in terms of people's division.
I 100% agree with you, and I think the only other reflection I would add to that is that thank God we've got compulsory voting and compulsory proportional representation voting for the House of Representatives. It doesn't mean that we're protected, because you can still then just intentionally force the fringes to go and vote and kick our asses, and then find ourselves, looking at the polling right now for One Nation, that's obviously a bit of a concern. But certainly in Europe and in liberal democracy where it's not compulsory voting, there's a lot of people who just get disenfranchised, give up on, like a plague on both your houses, and I'm not going to bother showing up to vote.
And I think, that came, I went to the UK late last year for the UK Labor Party conference and the Global Progress conference in London, and this was the theme, that these people are now so disenfranchised, the rural South in America, working poor in America, the same in the UK, north of England where I come from, huge swathes of Europe, they're so disenfranchised, the only time they're going to vote is for a demagogue, is for someone that's going to blow it all up. We don't have that. You've got to vote either way, right? But the other thing I think people miss is, and this is when I get cranky with the post-materialist left, this idea that Labor built neoliberalism in Australia. Neoliberalism was a global phenomenon, right? if we'd stayed out of it, we'd be Cuba. And if you've been to Cuba, I don't think most people healthcare is pretty good, but other than that, you wouldn't want to live there.
I don't think that's very good anymore either. I was actually reading an article about Cuba in the New York Times the other day.
It's equal, but it's at a low level. Right? So Labor didn't build neoliberalism in this country. It was an economic force that swept the world. What Australian Labor did in the 80s was ameliorate the most extreme versions of it. So we did not leave whole communities behind the way they did in the north of England with the textile industry and the coal industry, the way they did with manufacturing across the world. Yes, we lost manufacturing jobs, but we tried to ameliorate. So we introduced universal healthcare. We introduced superannuation. Young people are often shocked when I tell them it was the Blair government in 1999 who introduced the first minimum wage in England. Right? We've had that since 1907 in this country. So actually, one of what I'm saying is our electoral system is often given all the credit for why we're not quite down that path yet, although we're seeing something emerge now with One Nation. But it's also because of the actions of successive Labor governments that have been almost counter-cyclical to the rest of the world. And when working people were really thrown under the bus, we didn't do it to that extent here, So those working people were able then in the 1990s to become John Howard's battlers and become sole traders and independent and maintain a reasonable standard of living. Working people in Australia, most of them still have something left to lose. They're not quite at that point of saying, it's all fucked and I'm not going to vote for anyone. And even those people moving to One Nation, when you read the work Kos Samaras and other people are doing and you're asking them why, it's not just a general rage. They're pointing at pretty specific things like, well, the local hospital doesn't have a full-time doctor anymore, or, my kids couldn't get work in my town, so they've moved away. So they're even, that it's not such an incoherent rage. It's still settled in material things. And so I think that's a product of Labor governments in the past. Obviously, for those of us on the real left, not doing enough, but doing a lot more than the Democrats or Labor did in the UK or were able to, but also of our electoral system requiring them to be more engaged. And they do. Why was it such a big win last year when none of the commentariat saw it coming? Well, I didn't read one article during the election about the impact of urgent care clinics in any of the major papers. And yet it was a big reason a lot of people voted Labor. Those little things that very well-off, highly educated, highly paid, inner urban knowledge class workers who dominate the media and the political class do not think about. They don't think about how long it takes them to get to work on the train because they've got a paid-for parking spot in the CBD. They don't think about having to get to an urgent care clinic because they've got top-tier private health insurance and the local GP on call and they can afford the gap fee. So they're not seeing the things that are cutting through.
Don't get me started on that one. I think we talked ad nauseum during our election preview with David and Jesse on that one. So I think we've dedicated hours on why the political journalists in the country are shit. All right. Let's get to the things I actually wanted to talk to you about. I know we really went down another lane of conversation there, which I enjoyed. But imagine if I am a public policy genie and I grant you 3 public policy wishes for this particular government. What are they?
Tax reform, significant. I mean, there's already been quite a bit. I think people underestimate the impact of Jim getting those super changes they're going through. What was all about the back down? Well, if you'd said 5 years ago he's going to introduce 30% on balances over 3 and 40 on balances over 10, there would have been, it never happened. It's happening. Reversal of stage 3 tax cuts and so on. But that in itself, the stage 3 thing wasn't reform. It was just fixing a very bad idea by the opposition. So I do think there needs to be tax reform. It's being talked about a lot at the moment, and I'm not, I don't have any special insights. The Chifley Research Centre does not work for the government. We're separate to that. But obviously I've done a lot of work in this area coming from per capita, and I was hired with the full knowledge of that, to be, in the party's think tank. And it's, I think, inescapable now that the tax system is not working for anyone other than the super wealthy, the people with a lot of assets. And funnily enough, it was designed to do that by the Howard and Costello governments. And what happened in 2019, you were able to run a pretty good scare campaign against a big agenda from opposition. And I think there are some important lessons learned from that. It's not the lesson that the naysayers on the post-materialist left say, oh, no, they're too scared to do anything. No, it's about how you do it. It's about prosecuting an agenda within government, persuading people, pointing out where things are not working as they should, even on their own terms, Stephen. So, right, when CGT discount was introduced in 1999, it was a result of the review of business taxation commissioned by Peter Costello from John Ralph, businessman. And Ralph's argument for the CGT discount was that it would turn us into a nation of shareholders and entrepreneurs. And 25 years later, 67% of retail banking activity is residential mortgages, and we have such low productivity that we can't grow the economy by more than 0.5% before hitting inflation. That is directly related to the way the CGT has operated. It has not gone into productive activity, has not gone into entrepreneurialism or shares or startups. That benefit has gone into people sitting on piles of property and becoming a landed gentry, and making it impossible for the next generation not just to afford a house, but to do anything, right? So if you're a person in your 30s with a great business idea but no family money, and you can't borrow against your house because you don't have a house, you can't start a business. You can't do anything terribly productive. So the CGT discount has actually failed on its own terms. Even if you were to say, oh, I agree that we should do this to drive productivity has gone backwards, and directly as a result of that. So it's not just what it's done to the housing market, it's that it's pushed all of this wealth, $10 trillion, into land that is being used for single dwelling houses, and sometimes not even that, just left there to appreciate, empty, not anything productive. So we need a bigger conversation about tax. The intergenerational lens is important, and call out to my friend Thomas Walker at Think Forward, who did the tax summit with us last year, has really done a lot to say young people, you know, we're not communists, we just want some opportunity here. Can you? And it is true that intergenerationally is playing out. It's not giving people the ability to build wealth that ordinary people had in the past. But it's ultimately a class divide. You've either got assets or you don't. And it's got to the point where now you can't buy assets with income from labour. And so that just destroys social mobility. So first one, tax reform. But yes, it's bigger than just a cut here or a tweak there. And we have to look at how those things will play out in the system.
Before you move on to the second one, Emma,
yeah.
let's just to follow up on the capital gains concessions. We talked about this on the pod last week in our mailbag episode, and one of the questions that Lissy and Todd were asking is, well, with those savings over the next decade, where could that be spent?
Well, the first thing to say is the savings seem big, right? $250 billion over 10 years. That's what it's costing us at the moment. Now, if we change the concession, and it depends how we do that, whether we reduce it or return to the perfectly legitimate system that Keating had, where it's actually done on real calculations of inflation, then that will change investor behaviour too. So that, you know, you're not going to get necessarily that full 250 back in government coffers. It'll go into other asset classes or other investment forms, which is why we also need to, you know, consider all of that when we do it. You can't just go, right, that's done and now we've got $250 billion. But we'll certainly have revenue. I think there is a strong case to reduce income taxes on lower income people, those that are trying to work and build a family. But I would actually, and I think that that's important, you'll need to say to some people, well, we're going to put some money back in your pocket because we're going to reduce your ability to make the kinds of windfall gains that your parents did, right? So we'll give you a bit more help now. But my big thing is services, universal services. I would like to see a significant proportion of that money going into social housing. Labor's already doing a lot more in that space than it's been given credit for. Hal Paulson from UNSW has a piece in Conversation this week pointing out that it's basically halted, the investment has halted the decline in social housing, but we need more to get it back up to the level it needs to be to put adequate pressure on the private rental market. And I'd like to see, I think, there's a strong appetite for universal early childhood education and care and for strengthening our health and education systems as well. And that's really where most people want public funds spent. They want them spent in giving people opportunity. Of course, the big gap there, and people will jump on me for this because I've got an unwarranted reputation as being against welfare. I'm not. We do need to absolutely fix our social safety net. We need to invest in not just more generous support for people that can't work for whatever reason. If you've got a disability or serious caring responsibilities, no amount of punitive action is going to get you into a full-time job. You just can't do it. But we've also got to look at how we support people into work, into those employment services, which are really brutal and just a punitive system, and investing. Already, again, a lot of this is going on. Free TAFE has been invested in paid placements for students of some of the lowest paid healthcare occupations, support for apprenticeships and so on. So more investment in that space as well to build and to build what is going to be a productive economy once we're in a post-carbon era. Yeah.
So that's your first wish. You got two more, Emma?
They're all interrelated. I think there were some good moves made on aged care in the first term of the Albanese government, at least to sort of stop the bleeding in aged care. But there's a big aged care challenge coming over the horizon as boomers age into their 80s. A lot of Labor's core support comes from women like me, right? Middle-aged women who have got elderly parents and young children and are stretched to the limit in terms of the amount that they can take on in paid and unpaid work. And what we're finding, Elliot Stein had a great piece, he's now with the York Park Group in Saturday paper last week about the provision of palliative care in aged care. Residential aged care is really becoming a palliative care system, and I have personal experience of this with my mum recently, and we were able to navigate it well, but only because I know the system very well. So big shifts around how we manage end-of-life care and aged care and continuing down this path of more care in the home. But I don't think we've got the settings quite right in aged care. So I think that's one we need to look at a lot. Housing, aged care, and the other one really for me is health. We're lucky compared to many countries with our health system, but it has been chipped away at repeatedly over recent years. And so big investments into Medicare and bulk billing are really important first step. But it's heartening to me to hear Mark Butler say he's going to look to push the limits of the Constitution on things like specialist fees. Healthcare is no longer just about, patching up broken bodies and giving them basic, emergency care. People, as healthcare and the options for it become so advanced, if you're a billionaire, you're at the point where you can basically live forever, right? Or very, very, very elderly with a lot of help. And people will expect those needs. And having been through the system and the ringer with my late husband, the ability to navigate complex needs and specialists is far too costly, both in terms of the financial cost and the emotional and wellbeing input cost. So I think there are three federal areas of policy that I'd like to see. But if I can be cheeky and say my other pet one is a gradual, and this isn't something that can be imposed by the federal government, it has to be negotiated through the community and through workplaces, but a gradual continued reduction of working hours till we get to a 4-day week. I don't know why we stopped at 38 in 1983. We've got more labour hours in the economy than ever. Women are at 64% labour force participation. Families cannot work any more paid and unpaid hours than they are doing. And actually, the productivity gains would be best shared by giving us some time back to spend with our kids and our elderly parents and just to have some time. So I think a reduction in working hours is on the cards over time as well. But that's one for the Labor movement rather than the Labor government.
I was going to say, that's a nice cherry on top. As you were telling me, yeah, I could do that. I could easily do 4 days a week. That would be great.
You and I wouldn't, though, is the problem, because we keep working.
Yeah, I know. I was also thinking about, how am I going to get all that stuff done? Anyway, consultancy problems. Maybe a bit more sort of current conversation, thinking about Jim Chalmers and if he was sort of laying out, heading into this budget and setting up the economy to see out the rest of this particular term, I feel like I wonder if he's sort of gone, I thought we'd broken the back of inflation, because it was something, inflation and the cost of living was just hanging around every government. It wasn't an ideological thing, right? It was just the nature of the global economy. And he must have been thinking, New Year's, Christmas Day, go to take the kids to the beach, put the feet up, and yes, we've finally sorted inflation. And it just feels like, reading what's coming out of the United States at the moment and what's going on in Europe, it just feels like it's just these inflationary pressures are building again. How much of that does that hamper the government's ability to roll out some of the things that they may be thinking about that they've probably not told us about, but certainly in the back of their minds?
So that absolutely depends on framing the tax reform argument, right? So these things, the reason that we have high inflation and that the Reserve Bank can't seem to get it under control is because the tools of monetary policy are no longer effective against the great accumulated wealth of the top 5% of people. It's not just that 1%. It's not just billionaires. It's very wealthy people. So if you look at what actually drove inflation last quarter, and, such an effort to say it was government spending. Where's the government spending that's driving inflation?
Well, I mean, that was a big argument we were all making.
Because we increased a childcare workers' wages from $21 an hour to $25 an hour. You think that's what drove inflation, or aged care workers, or because we provided 3 days preschool to kids, women, that's letting women get back. That's not driving. So government spending, no. What it is, if you look at where the money went, it went on overseas holidays, it went on cars, it went on furniture and luxury goods. There is too much wealth sitting at the top of the economy that no one can touch. These people aren't sensitive to interest rates. If interest rates go up, they get more return on their investments, right? So the challenge for Labor here is to make that point that actually talking about changing things like capital gains tax discount isn't just about making housing more affordable. It's about lifting the productive capacity of the economy so that we can grow the economy without hitting these inflation roadblocks. That means putting more investment into the middle of the economy, the productive part of the economy, and less into the pockets of people that are either hoarding it or spending it offshore. And so that is actually an argument for reform, not against reform. This comes down to this binary framework that the Fin Review and the Oz and all push upon us that, it's just spending restraint versus tax. Right? There's a very simple calculation. It doesn't work in the economy that these people have created. It worked in a growing economy, in an economy that was post-war, bringing a lot of working people, women into middle-class jobs, educating people, lifting growth, encouraging savings and investment then helped. But now those savings and investment are not going into things that benefit the vast majority of people. So we don't want to see ridiculous things like what Scott Morrison did, pumping tens of billions of dollars into kitchen renovations in Brighton and Vaucluse, right? That's absolutely inflationary. But building social homes in the regions for people to live in so that they can then go to work and contribute to the economy is by definition not inflationary. So not all spending is inflationary by government. Actually, the problem with our economy is directly related to the reasons we need to have government reforms, because we need to restructure this economy in a way that it works for people, for working people, for 95% of us, and not just for that global elite that have regained their complete control over international markets and interest rates and decisions around tax and decisions around investment, and done so quite deliberately to defeat the social democratic changes of the post-war era. They need to be reversed. A lot of that needs to be reversed. A lot of it needs to be, and it's not about becoming communist and having state design. It's about the government saying, well, we're going to invest where that investment catalyses other investment from the private sector, where it lifts living standards, where it lifts growth, not just to give someone a handout who doesn't need it, right? He's already doing very, very well. So, no, I think the financial press and those global forces of ultra-capitalism will try to say, well, you can't do anything because it'll just cause inflation. Absolutely we can. We can bring inflation down while lifting living standards up. And we can do so by benefiting 90% of people. Who's going to take a haircut? Those rich people that don't want to share, that are never going to vote Labor, and that genuinely believe that working people are just cogs in a machine and their most important right is to make unlimited wealth. I'm not worried about annoying them, Stephen, personally. I think it's about time someone said no to them.
I read an article over the summer in the ABC on the sort of various political reporters predicting what the focus of the new year would be. One of the things that came up, and I sent it to you, you had very, what can I say, robust reflections on some of those that contributed to that piece, which I won't read out aloud.
No.
But, God bless you for your candour. But a couple of them had mentioned predicting the focus of the new year would be on the size of the parliament. And I thought that was interesting. I'm keen to get your thoughts on that. The last time we increased the size of the House of Representatives was in 1983. I was 8. When our population was 16 million. It's now 28 million.
Yeah.
Just thoughts about why that would be important.
Yeah, this is a classic inside the beltway thing, right?
That's okay.
Right? It is important because what it means, our population's almost doubled since we last, it's on track to double within the next 5 years from when we last increased the size of the parliament. What that means is more and more people being served by the same representative. And so we do actually need, I would say, to increase the size of the parliament so that people have better representation, closer proximity to their representatives, and also because it would give opportunity to people to bring, more people into the parliament, more diverse people that are genuinely representative of new and emerging communities, both in the suburbs and in the regions. Do I think it'll be a big focus? No. I think it'll be something that's pursued behind the scenes. There'll be conversations. Don Farrell leads this area at the moment, very, very skilled negotiator, backroom champion. And I think there'll be lots of internal conversations that go on with other parliamentary parties and independents, with experts in this space. They'll be talking about it, but it won't be a big public focus of reform, and it won't be something that we throw a lot of political capital away on, because to the ordinary person, they go, they just want more seats in parliament, they just want more jobs for their mates, right? We need to, again, roll the pitch on that for a fair while to help people understand this isn't just about putting more of our people into cushy jobs in parliament. It's about representation for you and a better democracy. We have many layers of government, but our federal government's actually quite small by international standards compared to, comparable developed nations. So, I think it's important, but I don't think it's no more urgent now than it was 5 years ago, or will be in 5 years from now. And there are much more urgent material issues that the government will focus on, and the Labor Party, which is the we, should focus on in terms of people's needs and their trust in government. And only when you have rebuilt that trust and you've got people to say, yeah, actually the government or government in and of itself is a worthwhile thing, then you can start to have that argument about why we should increase the size of it.
The only problem is, Emma, is if you increase the size of the House of Representatives, you also then have to increase the size of the Senate. And that means
representative swill.
That means Tasmania, and I don't know, certainly House of Reps members listening to this podcast will thoroughly agree with me. I mean, that means that Tasmania increases from 12 senators to even more. I was in Tassie helping their economy when I went there for summer last year, and I was in Launceston, and I was walking down one street in downtown Launceston, and there was one particular street, and Tassie listeners will know what street I'm talking about. There was like 9 electorate offices on the one street between senators, House of Reps, and then Tasmanian lower house and upper house MPs. I was like, oh my God, like Tasmania. I know we pick on Tasmania is the glaring example of why do they get more representation, but I mean, There's representation and there's underrepresentation and there's overrepresentation. Tasmania's just like, I mean, they don't need the old joke. What if you won Tatslotto, what would you do? You'd go take over the Tasmanian Labor Party and give your mates Senate seats, you know?
All the worst tropes. Yeah, look, it's a quirk of our system, right? We built this peculiarly Australian electoral and government system where we took a bit from most of it from Westminster, but quite a bit from the newer US system. And so our Senate representing the states is a kind of importation from America to some extent. And no, you can't change that without going to a referendum and changing the constitution. And I don't think that's likely to be a priority anytime soon. To be fair to Tasmania, the reason they're all it's not so much the size of the population as its concentration in those two big cities, right? So you're going to get all your electorate offices in Launceston and Hobart because that's where the majority of people live.
Just find another street.
Well, then people can't find you, Stephen. You know, it's an old marketing rule set up across the road from your competitor.
Worked for Robert Ray for 2 decades. No one knew where his office was.
That's how he got things done.
They were stunned when the phone rang. Sorry, keep going.
So, no, look, I think that is the challenge here, right? We definitely need more seats in the House of Rep. We probably need more senators certainly in New South Wales. Queensland's population's grown considerably, but then there are states whose populations are declining, like Tassie and South Australia. So, but that's a constitutional challenge and one we can't get around. It's not a reason not to increase the size of the House of Reps, but all of these things are reasons why this will not be a priority public focus and shouldn't be for the government. No. It's machinery stuff. It's important, but there's a lot more urgent things going on.
Well, this basically is a machinery podcast, isn't it? So you allow us one question on that. Speaking of machinery, July the 23rd to July the 25th is the ALP National Conference, the triennial gathering of our wonderful
50th.
Labor. Is it?
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And it's going to be in Adelaide, a town that was my home for a while there. And at the conference, obviously, policy platform will be debated and endorsed. I'm interested in getting your thoughts on the way in which the party membership can engage in the shaping of the party platform. And I know it's sort of evolved over time. We've had, after election wins and losses, we've obviously had reviews into how can we better integrate our party membership into the decision-making processes of the party itself. Just talk us through what role does, or how, if you're a party member, how can you have a say in the shaping of the party platform as we head into this national conference in the middle of the year? And what's Chifley got to do with it?
Right. Well, okay. So to start with, I would argue, and you would expect me to, that Labor's process is the most democratic and inclusive policy development process of any party in the country. We don't hold our conferences behind closed doors like the Greens do or Libs do. So there are various options. There are now national policy committees on a number of different issues that party members can apply to join. They are voted in or out by rank and file Labor Party members to those committees. Then those committees meet several times in the lead up to conference to thrash out ideas. But any member can propose an amendment to the national platform, to the ALP platform. Any member can do that through the party process, through the conference process. And then, of course, we also get to vote on delegates to go to conference and represent those ideas and those changes, things that we want to change in the party platform. Cynics, again, that aren't of our party will say, well, the platform doesn't mean anything because you ignore it all the time. That's not true. The most egregious example I've been given of that in recent years was, Fatima Payman was right to cross the floor because the party platform said that the government should recognise Palestine. Well, we have. We didn't do it on Fatima's own timeline, right? But it was in the platform and there are processes in place, and that's how we move forward collectively. We are grounded in the Labor movement, And one thing that all people involved in the labour movement have known since day one is all we've got is each other. We don't have money, we don't have power, we don't have connections, we have each other, we have numbers. And so that is actually really important. Not only is that open to the membership, but, and this is often, again, a lot of those really what are neoliberal leftists, so socially very progressive, but really not up for collective control of the means of production and capital, would say is, unions have a terrible influence on the party. Well, we're the Labor Party and we came out of the Labor movement, and union membership might only be 15, 17% today, but the union delegates that go to our conference and advocate for policies that will support workers are doing so on behalf of all workers, not just the 17% that pay their union dues. And so ordinary working people get more of a say through their representatives in the unions that will come and say, look, out in Bermagui, this is happening, or, there are parts of the Latrobe Valley where young youth unemployment is at 27%. Can we, these things have had absolutely direct input into things like free TAFE and building and support for apprenticeships and, paid placements for social workers and nurses. That's coming on behalf of working people through their union to the party. So the process is, parts of it are archaic, they go back 125, 135 years, and they've been tweaked and expanded. We're moving much more into digital engagement now, so people can, you don't have to schlep up to the branch meeting every month on a rainy Wednesday night to get your point across. There are methods to get your input in. And then that becomes platform. That is the party's platform. And then there's the Federal Parliamentary Labor Party, which is the elected government party, and they will base their position on the platform, but they also are competing in an electoral contest. And that's what the Prime Minister meant when he said in Liverpool last year, and I've heard this derided by left and right, Greg Sheridan, as if the Labor Party would choose anything but democracy. The point he was making was the Labor movement decided to become, both in the UK and here and other parts of the world, New Zealand, etc., a party of government to make change through parliamentary process in a legitimate way and to expand its appeal beyond the people that had signed up to the movement. That was quite, people go, oh, it's a sellout. Actually, it's quite radical. It's a way of bringing working people's voices into the corridors of power and challenging directly the ruling class. And that's what our processes still do. So anyone who's a member of the party will know they'll get emails. You can vote for this person for national conference. You can apply to be on this policy committee. You can vote for this person to be on the policy committee. We're looking for your ideas, etc. But also non-party members who are ordinary award wage working people are better represented through that process than any other democratic process that's available to them in this country.
And it's a really good point you bring up, Emma, because think about it in my days as a union organiser, either when I was organising retail workers, when I was at the SDA, or organising truck drivers, when I was at the TWU, give the example of in retail, when we're rolling out the Woolworths agreement, the union might have 75, 80% density. I'm just picking a number out of the air there. I'm sure there are SDA organisers listening to me right now telling me exactly what that figure is. But whatever the density was, it's not 100%, right? But when we're rolling out an EBA and we go through the process of crafting a log of claims, every single worker at Woolworths gets to submit ideas through, survey work and meetings and whatnot that goes into this log, and then it gets negotiated. Then it comes back. Oh, it sounds patronising. I'm explaining everyone how EBAs work, but do you know what I mean? Like this journey that they go through, whether they're a member of the union or not, the union is the person that's driving that. And they'll vote. I'm constantly, when we should roll out the vote, like we'd get people to actually vote on like ballot paper. And in those meetings, I would say, who here is not a member of the union and you should consider also joining? There would always be folks that would vote and weren't members of the union and would consider the idea of joining the union. So the touch points that a union has to all of those workers each year is incredibly important and is often missed. I'm just reiterating the point that you just said. But I mean, if you were to remove that relationship, it's 50% of those delegates on the floor of that conference of the Labor Party are representatives of those workers, not just the unions, but those workers. And you remove that, you then basically become a European social democratic party. And that's one of the reasons why you're not winning elections anymore.
That's exactly right, my friend. Exactly right. And for all those, there are some more radical unionists that are, now angry at Labor and signing up with the Greens. The Greens won't give you this. They will not give you this. They will not allow the ordinary voices of ordinary people to come in through those channels and for a mass movement to be represented. It will be who shows up and who argues their corner in the room. This is the foundational concept of the Labor movement 135 years ago. And I would argue in Australia, it has been more democratic and led by working people than just about any other Labor Party in the world, even the UK, right? That's my background, but there was a lot more influence of the Fabians and the Victorian elite and the sort of Fabian socialism on the development of that party, whereas here it has always been what do the working people need, Obviously, we go beyond that sometimes. Obviously, we go beyond that often, and there are bigger ideas that need to be explained and things that are incredibly complex like monetary policy, but paying attention all the time, not just saying, well, you object to that interest rate rise because you don't understand monetary policy. No, people aren't stupid. They object to that interest rate rise because they know they can't afford it and it's not going to do anything to stop the folk in Brighton booking another holiday to Europe or buying another Mercedes-Benz. So, it's a really, I think, fundamental thing about Labor that has been sneered at and poo-pooed by the Conservatives for time immemorial, but now is being traduced, I would say, unconscionably by the post-materialist left, who are so obsessed with their own individual well-being and their own individual righteousness that they have completely lost any regard for the hard work that goes into representing people that can't afford to or don't know how to or don't have the time to represent themselves.
Yeah. And one of the ways you can get involved, obviously, is through the Fringe program.
Yes.
And in your capacity at Chifley, you're in charge of that.
Well, that's overstating it a little bit, but managing the process. Yeah, we're curating the Fringe. Yeah.
Tell us about that. The Fringe program, obviously, is over the last couple of national conferences I've gone to, it's got better and better and better, and far more accessible and bigger and more popular. And we did a couple of podcasts last national conference, and it was heaps of fun and well attended when we're up in Brisbane. So give us a bit of a sense of what's going on with the Fringe this year and how people can get involved.
Exciting. We've just opened expressions of interest for Fringe, and I'll send you the links you can send out to your subscribers where they can jump on board. It's open to all ideas. Obviously, if we get thousands of ideas, we can't accommodate all of them. So Chifley is working with the party to curate Fringe, which is done in previous years under David Epstein and others. And certainly, so we're doing that again this year. Fringe will run from the lunchtime on the Thursday, the first day of the conference, right through Friday and over Saturday morning. And what it is a space just in the same building, Adelaide Convention Centre, but to the side of the main action, that's open to the public, open to anyone to come along. And we will have a combination of display stalls, so often organisations, non-profits, NGOs, some businesses and others will come and set up a stall about what they do to try and get that work in front of people. We have over 400 attendees at the conference, ministers, senior ministers, advisors, international dignitaries, union leaders. It's a powerful group of people, and the ALP rank and file and delegates. And then we have events. So we might have a keynote speech from a minister on a topic if someone wants to talk about that. We'll have lots of panel discussions, workshops, everything from really dense policy conversations around, how do you do tax reform, or how do you do urban planning in a way that delivers more houses, to stuff about campaigning and organising, to things that cover our cultural values, what our values are as Australians. So we are open to all ideas, from members and non-members alike, supporters and people that want to agitate alike. My intention this year is to really meaningfully curate it into streams, because there are certain subjects that are coming up already, only a week into the EOI process. So a lot of people want to come and talk about housing, for example, and various aspects related to housing. There's quite a lot of interest in how we protect our democracy and talk about cultural issues, the great debate around social cohesion, for example, that will be part of it. There are people that want to look at AI and tech and how we both benefit from the opportunities, but also put some guardrails around that so that we're not destroying jobs or damaging people's mental health. So there'll be some thematic things that I will identify from the submissions that come in, but it's very much driven by the community. It's not the parliamentary party or the National Secretariat saying this is what Fringe is about. It's a conversation. It's a two-way, three-way, multifaceted conversation. So I know you guys will come along again. We hope you'll get some good content out of it for the nation's best social democratic podcast. And we'll certainly be there'll be various unions coming along, non-profit groups. Anyone's welcome to put in an EOI, and I will do my absolute best to accommodate as many as I can in the programming, in conjunction with, I've got a board committee that will help me with all of that. So I'm not the gatekeeper, but I'm looking forward to it. It should be really good. Yeah.
Excellent. And just let your board know that the two most attended sessions of the Fringe program were the two Social Democratic live episodes. So just make sure that, you look after.
They were crackers up in Brisbane. They were very well done. So.
Yeah. We will drop in the show notes link to the EOI for the Fringe. Get around that. We're going to do our intention is anyway to do two shows for the Fringe itself, but we'll obviously talk more about that once Emma gives us the all clear. And the other thing, just to quickly wrap up last question before we wrap up, anything to plug for the Chifley Research Institute at the moment? What events you got coming up?
Yeah, so we do every 3 years we do a policy conference following the election, and that will be at the middle of May this year. So we'll be announcing that very shortly. So keep an eye on our socials and our website for the Chifley Policy Conference. That's a gathering of wonks like myself, party members, but also senior ministers and their staff will come along and talk about not just what Labor's already doing, but what the policy directions need to be for the future. Our theme this year is prosperity with purpose, how Labor governs. So we'll be looking not just at what's been done in the first 4 years, but what's on the agenda this year as well. The conference will be round about budget time. So it should be of great interest to a lot of people. So keep an eye out for that. In the meantime, we publish regular articles and analysis. We're doing a big piece of work at the moment. Sarah's doing the heavy lifting because I spend my time doing this fun stuff. But looking at the impact of Labor's gender equality policies in the first term of this government. It was obviously the first gender equal cabinet and caucus, female finance minister, gender equal leadership team. So what we're doing is saying, what has that translated to in terms of outcomes for women? And the news so far is pretty good, but we're doing that in partnership with Gender Lens Australia, just to put an analytical lens over what's been achieved there. And then we have regular little events. We're not doing podcasts because I like talking to people like you rather than try to host them. It's not my skill set. But we do occasional events. We'll do events around books and policy ideas. And we will be rolling out this year as well a series of conversations with ministers and MPs in the Labor government to help them reach a wider audience. And we'll also be getting out to your branches, to members. We'll be getting out. Chifley will be available to come and talk to your branch, either in person or virtually, and to have a two-way conversation through the party's think tank about policy ideas. And there'll be avenues set up where you can talk to us, whomever you are, about what you think Labor should be doing and engage with a community of people that are as I said, really part of a movement that was quite a radical grassroots movement, and big part of my job is to bring that next generation of passionate social democrats into the fold.
Wonderful. Can you go on a mailing list, or what ways in which you can get all these updates? What do you do?
So if you go to chifley.org.au, you can subscribe to our mailing list. All of our stuff's free. You just click a button, you'll join our mailing list. You'll get a regular newsletter and updates when we publish articles or reports. We also are the home of key speeches by the president of the ALP, party officials, and some of that. I can't possibly put up every speech by every Labor frontbencher, but when there's a particularly good one, we will post that as well. Chifley.org.au, check us out. Please join our little community and look for us. At the moment, we're on mainly on LinkedIn and Facebook, but we'll be expanding some social media presence this year as well.
Well, Emma Dawson, as always, I'm smarter for the experience of sitting and listening to you talk about policy. Thanks very much for coming on the show, and best of luck with the year ahead. A lot of you're going to have a busy year with all of the different events coming up with Chifley.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, and we'll see you there.
Hi, Social Democrats. It's Stephen here. We want to get to know you better. We want to know who's listening to Socially Democratic and what you want the show to be about. So we've launched the Socially Democratic Listener Survey. It's just 15 quick questions and will only take about 3 minutes to complete, and it's completely confidential. And as a thank you for doing so, anyone who completes the survey will go into the draw to win a trip to Adelaide for the 2026 ALP National Conference, which is happening in July this year, including return domestic flights and accommodation. If you are from Adelaide, then we're going to fly you to Melbourne for one of our live shows leading up to the Victorian state election. Now, if you're from overseas, obviously we can't include international flights and accommodation, but we still want to get your feedback and complete the survey as well, because your input is super, super important to us as a member of our overseas listening audience. To take part in this listener survey, just click the link in this episode's show notes and let us know everything that is important to you in terms of your podcast, Socially Democratic. Thanks. Today's episode was hosted by myself, Stephen Donnelly, and produced by Grace Eyre. If you like the show, please rate us and review us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you really like the show, then join our Patreon community for early and ad-free access to each episode. We regularly take questions and comments from our Patreon members, so get in there if you want to have your say. And finally, get all the latest updates and bonus content by following Socially Democratic on our social media channels. The links are in our show notes. See you next Friday.